Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, listeners. Welcome back again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. And today's guest is going to be talking to us about how you can take the lessons of high performance from high-tech industries such as Formula One and apply those to get the best out of your own business. We're also going to talk a fair bit about the leadership lessons he's learned from such a high-stress environment. So it's going to be a great chat, particularly for any of the Formula One fans out there like my better half. So my guest is Paul Teasdale, high performance expert, process improvement expert, leadership pro as well, let's say. And he's going to have some great thoughts to share with us. Really looking forward to this chat.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast.
Leadership talk for the modern manager.
With your host, David Hatch.
Paul, thank you for joining me this morning on this sort of sunny Friday in the south of England.
Thanks for having me. And good to know that you're not too far away, only down the road, really.
Yeah, small world, isn't it?
It is.
Well, I'm going to take a big risk, as I do now at the beginning of every episode, and hand things over to you to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a bit about what you do and your background.
Oh, thanks, David. Now I help people perform using lessons from Formula One. That's my main offering out to the world. And how this has come to fruition, really, is that I spent 7 years working for our local Formula One team here at McLaren, helping them to take their methodologies, their ways of working, some of their technological expertise out to wider organizations. And that's what I do now as an independent, helping organizations and individuals understand what lessons from F1 are applicable to them and how they can apply them for their own high performance. But I haven't always been in Formula One. I came in, I remember the interview at McLaren where one of the first things I said is, I'm not an F1 fan. I'm a fan of high performance and I'm a fan of the team in itself. And I've definitely started following them more since I joined. But for me, it was always about high performance, about helping people perform in any way I can. But my background is fairly mixed, everything from sausage making to banking to shipping, all sorts of bits in between. But the common thread has always been about helping others perform at their best. And that's what I try to take into what I do now. So having had an engineering background, an engineering degree, focusing in sort of manufacturing engineering, I went from, my first job was repairing and overhauling aeroplane engine parts. Although I wasn't doing that hands-on myself, I was in the sort of business process improvement side of things. I went in there as a graduate and to join a graduate scheme that they supposedly had, but unfortunately it didn't really exist. So I spent most of my first year helping them to design and build a graduate scheme. So in that, I did a lot of research into what a good grad scheme was, and found some really good ones out there and thought, although this is great for people joining, by the time I've come around to my end of my first year, I'm not going to be a grad anymore. I'm going to be someone who's been in the company for a little while. So as part of that, I ended up finding one of those organizations that had a really good graduate scheme already and joining them. So it was Kerry Foods, who make sausages. So I ended up being a production manager in a sausage factory, which was an education in and of itself, and where my first real foray into management and leadership directly of people came into play. And from there, I did everything from working for a shipping container company based out of Liverpool that did the logistics of containers to and from ports, before joining a consultancy that primarily worked in food manufacturing industries. Did that for 5 years, doing rapid business turnaround, leaving home at 4 a.m. on a Monday, living in a factory and in a local hotel, and then coming back on a Friday afternoon. And after 5 years of that, it was more than enough at that stage, and decided to make a move. And myself and the wife decided that it wasn't going to be moving from London to Manchester or Liverpool or Birmingham, whatever that might be. We decided that Auckland was the place for us. So we moved over, packed everything up, shipped over to New Zealand, worked for a big dairy company out there, mainly in facilitation and process improvement at the corporate level. So working in their corporate offices. I mean, I think at the time it was a $7 billion business and has expanded since, and it's a big organization, and in the team that decided where the milk went. So if you start off with milk, you can make all sorts of things out of that. And it's like, how do you choose what to make and when? So I was helping them with their processes and their internal improvement area efforts. And then made redundant, decided I'm going to have a look what I can get. The wife's 6 months pregnant. What do I do? And took a chance and took a job in banking. So spent some time in a bank in New Zealand, helping them take a manufacturing mindset and an improvement mindset into the world of business banking. So that was an interesting foray, where my only experience prior to that with banking was maxing out the credit card and spending all my money, So yeah, I did that. And after 5 years in New Zealand, we decided to come back home for family reasons, and wanted to have something that was going to excite me when I came back. Luckily, had a friend of mine who I've known for many years, who was in the simulation team in McLaren. And he mentioned that they were looking for people who could take this sort of improvement focus out to other organizations. Got in touch with those guys, came over, had an interview, and got the job and had a great time working for McLaren, learning not only how things are done in the racing team, but also a bit on the automotive side, but working with some amazing companies and some amazing people, helping them take the technologies and methodologies of McLaren and apply them to their own things. Everything from supermarket shelf stacking, oil and gas drilling, airport operations, all sorts of bits and pieces. And from there, decided to make the leap and go independent, and that's what I do now.
Wow, what a journey! I'm trying to think if there's a kind of transport that you haven't worked on. Trains, I suppose. That must be it.
There was a trains link in McLaren. I didn't actually work with those guys, but yeah, trains, planes, and automobiles definitely.
Yeah, and shipping as well. There you go. Yep. Yeah, brilliant. So I'm going to have to ask, for the sake of all the Formula One fans, my wife being one of them, who were the drivers during your period at McLaren? So we can date it.
So includes the likes of Fernando Alonso, obviously Lando Norris. There were various others. Daniel Ricciardo came in towards the end of my time there. So yeah, it was some amazing people. And I remember there's a small gym in the McLaren offices, and I used to pop down there at random times during the day because it was busy at lunchtimes and things like that. And I popped down there, and there's Fernando in the corner having a photo shoot with the company that I can't remember the company, but that does all the dumbbells and weights and equipment. And there's me in the background sweating away. And I think his people came over and said, "Do you mind just moving out the way for a little bit while we do this?" But no, I mean, great people, and didn't have a lot of interaction directly with the drivers, but you could see when they were in the offices and in the factory, when they would come around, it's the unseen part of what they do. They spend a lot of time speaking with the people in the factory about what's going on with the car, what could be better, how it feels. And it's an unseen part of the role of a driver, is that feedback and clarity of what I'm feeling. How do we translate that into an engineering requirement in order to make some changes, test it, and do what's what?
Sort of reminds me of the test pilots, who actually, they think you perceive them as sort of the flash guys with the sunnies and all the other stuff, but actually most of them are also engineers and knew as much about the aircraft as the people building them quite often. So it's an interesting one. So I mean, the Formula One world then, is it as glamorous and high stress as it appears from the outside, or is it not?
As high stress, yes. I mean, when you consider that, on any race or any weekend or any week, you are creating so many different new parts, and with the introduction of 3D printing and rapid design and things like that, it's changed the game even further, in the simulation world that goes along with that. But actually, it's constant in terms of making changes now and implementing them, testing them, understanding what's what. And yeah, just getting ready for the season. And when you're in the season, just actually delivering on a day-to-day basis. So I was actually speaking to an old colleague who a few years ago used to be in that sort of garage side of things on the electronics, and just recalling how the only thing he remembers of all of the different tracks that he's ever worked at is the color of the garage doors, because everything else is a blur. You know, it's like, I can tell you I was in Barcelona because it was a red door. And it was, but yeah, it's not as glamorous as you think. It's a lot of hard work, but it's a labor of passion. It's definitely a sport that is a passionate sport that people work on because they're passionate about delivering excellence, which is what drives things, really.
And I guess it's what attracted you to it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, in that in a roundabout way, in that as I say, I wasn't and would never consider myself to be a Formula One fan. Part of the reason being that when people say they're a Formula One fan, they are generally a fan, and with the fanatic word included in that, because they know the ins and outs, they know what car was in what year on what track on what bend, and what was the eye section of a certain bit of material that sat in the car that was designed that day by a certain person. It's just, that's not my thing. I'm about the performance element of that. It's like, how do you get a team to work together and focus on those things and make incremental change, as well as having the big changes that go along with that, and make it work consistently.
So from all those different industries, what are the differences and similarities that you've noticed between kind of those industries you were particularly interested in the answer to that between sausage making and Formula One, actually? But
well, sausage making and Formula one of the similarities that I see, or can be a similarity or a difference depending on the organization, is the pace of change and the pace of the organizational heartbeat, if you will, is often driven by the rate of its production, or its tack time, or its sausages are made fresh today for delivery tomorrow, and certainly were at that time. So it's like, you've got to be changing and reacting very quickly. Whereas if you're working in another organization that made, even within food manufacturing, doing ready meals, for instance, those ready meals have got plenty of time to sit on the shelf, and before you need to do something different in that world. Now, that drives a lot of the behaviors around how people react to change and cope with change. And when we start to look wider into the likes of financial industries, into oil and gas drilling and things like that, it's actually an important factor in terms of how used to change are people, and how used to change are people in the different teams. And airport operations is a classic one, where the focus is the here and now. It's delivering that plane, moving it around the chessboard and getting it off the airport and getting it back on again, and moving those pieces around, to the extent that actually the help they need is more on the strategic element. Or it might be in how do you make better decisions in that space. But the rate of change of the business helps to dictate the rate of change of the attitudes and the behaviors of people. So that's a similarity that I see, and a difference depending on the business that's there. But it's all about people, and it's all about people making decisions and then putting those decisions into action. That's the critical bit.
Yeah, I like that answer. Yeah. Aligns with leadership as well. It's all about the people. Good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so Formula One then, is it really applicable to any organisation? What, can you take all of those lessons? Is there anything that doesn't fit?
Yeah. I mean, it's like everything. There are, if you say, right, this specific technology or this specific way of working, is it applicable here as it is here? Well, probably not. Even from one Formula One team to another, there might be differences. But once you start to step back and say, actually, what are the methodologies, the ways of working, the behaviors that are there, or even the way in which they tackle certain challenges as a business. So, high performance lessons. How do you be and how do you maintain high performance? There are some key lessons to be learned there. How do you lead with a high performance team? If you take, how is that done in the world of F1? If you take it back to the methodologies and the approaches that people take, then you can take lessons from that and apply it. And I think with me, it's always about adaptation and application. So it's like, you see something, how do I adapt what they're doing to fit into my organization if it helps me? And then how do I apply it? But even things like the regulatory side of it, there's huge regulation in the world of F1, like there is in financial services, pharmaceuticals, and things like that. How do Formula One teams approach changes in regulation for their advantage? And there's some real lessons that can be taken and moved there. It's not like, oh no, the rules have changed. Actually, yeah, the rules have changed. How do we make that our competitive advantage? How do we learn from that? How do we adapt? And some real lessons to be learned in that space. So, and believe it or not, even dealing with a limited budget. You think there's infinite money in the world of F1, and there simply isn't. And that's one of the rules that's becoming tighter in that space as well. So,
yeah, I was going to say it depends on the team, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, you're right. The rules are changing, aren't they? So.
Yeah, but how do you prioritize what you spend your money on is a challenge for any organization. And so, what I'm trying to bring to people is, here are some of the ways in which that is applied in the world of F1. Let's talk about how that could be applied. Is it going to be useful to you? What lessons can you take from that are going to help you be better? And that's what I do.
That second bit, that's the key, I think, isn't it? Is, hey, is it actually useful? And if so, how? Yeah.
We had a number of clients come to us where they'd seen a specific bit of technology, for instance, that was around prediction. So it's like, if you can predict whereabouts, if the car was to pit now, where would it come out on track? So that's a simple model that you can, well, it's not that simple, but it's a model that you can run in the world of F1 and say, right, at any point in time, I'm going to predict where I am now. If I pit, or if the safety car comes out, what am I going to do? And where will I come out on track? And we've had a number of clients come and say, we want that technology applied to our business. And it's just like, that won't necessarily be right for you. The principles of that, in terms of being able to predict and to be able to understand if you were to do something, or if something was to happen and you made this decision, what's the likely outcome? Now that's an approach, that's a methodology that you can use. The tool will probably be very different, and often needs developing in its own right. And we build proof of concept or test different technologies that exist in terms of how does that get you to the best possible solution for you.
Sort of human nature in a way, isn't it, though, I think. And a lot of high-tech industries suffer from that, where people will see, that's cool, it's the shiny object syndrome, I want that because it looks cool, what can I do with it? Whereas actually, as you say, you need to think about, what is the question, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and is this technology the best solution to it?
Definitely.
Half the time, probably not. It could just be human operator or mark on eyeball or whatever.
Exactly.
Interesting. Let's talk about data-driven decisions, because I know that's another one of your key interest areas. What can managers do to do that better, to make better decisions with data, and why do you think that's so important?
Well, I'll start with the why. It's important because managers and leaders in general are drowning in data. So I think of data, information, and insights as three different levels. The data is the raw facts and figures. It's the what. The information is where you start to bring that data together to tell you so what. It tends to be in reporting and retrospective, things like that. Insights are things that you can give to people that help them make better decisions. So a lot of time and effort is spent on providing managers with data and information. And they've then got to have the headspace and the know-how and the time to actually digest that, come up with the different options, think them through, and then go, right, this is the decision I'm going to make. So data-driven decisions, most of the time that I see these in organizations, they'll start with the data. And they'll start with this approach of, if I can give my manager more data, if I can invest in a system that gives them, this is a real case from a client where they'd invested, I think, maybe 10 million euro or so in a new factory to give line data on a bottling plant. Instead of being sort of minute by minute, hour by hour, it was second by second. And so they put servo motors and all sorts of different data capture points in there. And they were going, we've got all this data. It's brilliant. It's really, really high definition. It's really high quality data. All right. Okay. What are you going to do with it? Well, I don't know. And actually what it was leading to is managers could see this data on the phone. And they had behaviors where senior managers were looking at their phone and going, oh, the line's down. I'll pick up the phone. And it just causes noise all the way down the chain. Why is line 3 down? What's going on? And then their manager would, down the chain. And just suddenly everyone's time is all tied up. And that's a leadership behavior as well. So it's like, how do you drive the right leadership behaviors around it? So when it comes to data-driven decisions, I encourage people to put data last. And I follow a model that I've taken or built from my lessons from the world of F1 that I call the rapid performance. So you start with results. What results am I trying to drive? Am I clear on that? Actions. What are the actions that I can take that have an impact on those results? The levers that I've got at my disposal to push and pull. The people. Who are the people associated with deciding on those actions and putting them into place? Then those people need insights. We talked about what we mean by insights to help them make the best decisions. And then finally, you get to data. And if you do this approach, you can actually end up with what's the smallest data set I need and what's the critical data that I invest in that data, and that data right insight drives up. And that can help them to, one, minimize the noise that's around them, but two, minimize investment, both in time, in terms of money and time in new systems that won't necessarily give them any additional insight, through that. And, you see it with the likes of Tableau and, even Excel and other bits where people go, right, here's all the information. You can cut this any way, shape or form you like. Isn't this brilliant? And your manager's going, I got no clue. I don't know what to ask this or how to ask it. I might know what question I've got, but you've given me this thing as a tool, but I haven't been trained in terms of how do I actually get that insight out of that tool. So yeah, data's last in data-driven decisions.
Yes. Excel's the interesting example. I think we've all had that problem, haven't we? And even if you do know how to get the answer out, it might take you 4 hours to do it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of parallels there between an industry I used to work in the space sector with Earth observation imagery. So we had this whole very similar problem where customers wanted the data, in this case being a massive image of like 10, 20, few hundred square kilometers.
Right.
When actually the answer to the question they needed didn't really require them to have the image.
Right.
All they wanted was someone to interpret it and give them that answer.
Yeah.
But people go down that rabbit hole because space is cool, it's satellite imagery, which is also cool, and it's a picture they can look at, and everyone understands the picture, so that's what you want. It's very interesting. Yeah. Anyway, really, really like that strategy, actually, of putting data last.
Yep.
I think, because you think data-driven, and everyone assumes data first.
Yeah. And it also puts power back into what I would call operational leaders. It's quite often in bigger organizations as well, new tech and new IT systems and things are forced upon them because they're, maybe they haven't been consulted, but actually it's the IT side of the organization that's making the decisions on what to invest in at what time. And the reasons and the thinking and the strategies for those investments are generally around cost, but also what level of data am I going to get out of it? Assuming, and this is the big assumption and the real one that needs testing, that more data means more performance. And that's not always the case.
No, quite often the opposite, isn't it? The more data, the slower you get, right?
Well, that's definitely the parallel that I run with the F1 story, is that you can get more and more data from a Formula One car, but you need to put on more and more bits of telemetry and sensors, and that adds weight, and therefore your car slows down. So you've got to have that return on investment view as to the insights that I'm generating from this additional data. Does that outweigh the performance impact of the additional weight? And when it comes to humans, you can think of that simply in terms of the mind space. Like this additional data is consuming time and space in people's heads. Is that a good investment or not? Yeah,
it's a good analogy. I like it. Because by the time you've interpreted all that data, the race is over, isn't it?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, very cool. Right, let's change topic again very slightly. So,
Right.
what career development lessons have you learned along the way?
Well, you could say I haven't had the standard career path of sausages, shipping, banking, whatever it might be, in Formula One. But I think the key lessons for me is about firstly, get a coach or a trusted advisor to help you through. When there are segments in your life where you are looking to make a career change, then and often these are thrust upon you. Redundancies are a typical sort of area, or an organization changing in such a way that your position changes within that. So you have to be reactive, but actually, can you be proactive in what you do? And the other side is about think about the applicable skills and the transferable skills that you've got. It's like if I was just going, right, I'm in a background in food manufacturing, my next step has to be in that world of food manufacturing. Some of the great coaching that I had in those early days was about how do you step back and say, right, what is it that you do? Not the technical stuff of, making food and, working in that. How do you approach that? What is it you do that helps people to achieve the results that they want? Is that not just the same as the way something happens in this industry or that industry? Or why is it not applicable to any industry? What's good, and if you can broaden your horizons, and start to filter out, actually, yeah, I could go wider. And then you can have an approach. And I got some really great coaching advice from a guy I was speaking to last night, actually, in New Zealand. And it was about this thing called the personal shield. So it's like, how do you map out what's really personal and important to you, both in terms of where you've come from, what your values are, what your passions are, and what you want your future to be. So if you can lay out all your options in front of you, there's going to be compromises. So if you say, right, I'm going to move into banking or I'm going to stay in the food industry, well, where does that fit into where I've come from? Well, it's in the food industry one, I've got all that experience. It's a comfortable piece. But actually, if I look at my future where I want to be, it's not going to give me the opportunities to take a step up in terms of finance, leadership opportunities, whatever's important to you. Or it's going to have an impact on your health or your family life, and might impact the company that you're working for, might not align to your values. So how do you make those compromises? And by having that approach to the specific element of, you've got those decisions, widen out your choices as much as possible, but then give yourself a framework for understanding those compromises and being clear that I'm happy to make that compromise because of X, Y, and Z. That's one of the key ones. And I've done some sort of career development coaching with people, and it's amazing that you can start to see that, oh, I could do something different with this. I could take this elsewhere. But I don't want to. I'm a homebody. I don't want, that would mean I'd have to move locations. It would mean I'd have to move abroad or whatever it might be. Might have other people who go, the opportunity in front of me is means a cut in salary, but I get to go and live in these exciting parts of the world. It's going to be different depending on who you are, but understanding what's important to you is the starting point.
Thinking about it from the employer's side of the table as well. We see quite a lot in social media and in the news about poor hiring practices and people giving unrealistic job specs and all kinds of stuff like that. But actually, I think it's quite a good way of combating the sort of "we've always done it this way" argument, is seek candidates from outside of the industry.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more companies should be doing that. I don't know whether they are. Not my area, but
yeah, it's definitely been my experience. And when I took that move into banking, for instance, that was a specific tactic and strategy that they were doing, was saying, let's bring in someone from outside the world to actually really shake up how we look at things. And it was some interesting challenges there. It's good.
Good on them. Let's talk then a bit more specifically about leadership. Now, this question, I could ask it in two parts, actually, but let's start with, what are the key leadership lessons that can be learned from Formula One?
there's so many, and there are a few. There's a couple that I pick out really. One is around where do you make decisions, and how do you choose to make decisions in your organization? And there's a great term that came out of my time at McLaren, which is decisions at the point of most knowledge. So instead of, if you think about a traditional organization, and maybe some listeners can align to this, decisions are made hierarchically. And there are certain decisions that need to be made hierarchically. But actually, when things are happening in the moment, who decides what the next step is? And the story around this in terms of, I think it might have been Alonso's car, but there's a couple of minutes out before the start of the race, and it ain't going. You need your car to be going. This is the technical bit I've picked up over the years. You need the engine to be going. You also need to be on the pit lane in order to start, because if you don't start the race, that's it. You can't start it halfway through. And if you don't start, you can't finish. And if you don't finish, you can't win, or at least get some points. Therefore, you've got to do that. And so there's this car desperately trying to get it to start and get it to go and get it onto the pit lane with a couple of minutes to go. And they've got mechanics under there, and there's I believe a young mechanic under the car, scrabbling away, doing what they're doing. And at the time, one of the leaders from the McLaren team is sitting in the pit lane watching this happening. And there's a client guest with them. And they're saying, why aren't you're so calm? What are you doing? Why aren't you shouting at them, giving them instructions, you're a leader here, leading? And goes, I'm not going to make any decisions. I haven't got the most knowledge. That guy under the car there knows exactly what he can see. I've given him the training, and he's got the background. I've got every confidence that he will make the best decision in this moment with what he's got. And if I don't, I've failed as a leader, because I haven't given him the tools and techniques and resources for him to make those decisions. So leadership is about decisions at the point of most knowledge. And there's another lesson that goes along that, which a term I love, which is look for the eyes. So if you're looking in those moments where the proverbial has hit the fan and, everything's going wrong and people are looking across the team as to what they're going to do next. How do we solve this? How are we going to move forward? Look for the eyes. Who did the team look to make decisions? And you'll see it directly with their eyes. And that tells you who those leaders are in your team. And it doesn't matter what position they are, doesn't matter their seniority, doesn't matter how long they've been in the team, anything like that. If your team are looking to that individual physically for answers in that moment, that's a leader in your organization. They might not even know it at the time. They might not recognize it in themselves, but as a leader, if you're looking for the eyes, you can identify future talent, and you can then bring that talent through as well. So that's another critical piece as well. So look, a couple of leadership lessons for you there.
I really love those, actually. And they hit on two of the things that I love about great leadership. The first one is trust your team.
Yeah.
Like, you've hired them, you've given them the skills, the tools, the knowledge, the training. Stand back, trust them to do their jobs.
Yeah.
So many leaders get that so horribly wrong. And then the second side of it is leaders, actually, it's not necessarily tied up in a role or a job title. No. And anyone in the team can be a leader in any given moment. And I think companies and cultures that encourage that, I think, will last much longer, because they're going to have that pool of future leaders to call on.
Yeah, indeed. I'll tell you a third one. I'll put a third one in there as a bit of a bonus, around driving a culture. So how do you drive a culture? And specifically in this world, is driving a culture of responsibility through data. And one of the drivers, it might have been David Coulthard, one of the drivers before I arrived, used to say that there's a culture of responsibility at McLaren. And the reason for it is that the data is so trusted, and the data is so available, the right data is so available to the right people, that if I go into a corner and I brake too late, I can't come out of that corner and say, oh, it wasn't my fault, it was somebody else's. By the time I've come out the corner, the engineers can see the data in front of them. And most importantly, that data is trusted, that the only thing I can do out the back of that corner is to say, my fault, what do we do now to move on? And so that responsibility comes in. And if I reflect back on all of the organizations I've worked with, the number of arguments or opportunities to hide behind data that people say, oh, I'm not sure. I don't think the downtime was actually an hour and 20 minutes yesterday. I think it was more like an hour and 15. You spend all of your time and your effort arguing those things that you don't get down into why to begin with. Why did that happen? And most importantly, what can we do to move forward from here? So I'd encourage, from a leadership perspective, one of the angles there is, how do you make sure that the data you've got is trusted? And trusted is a different thing to accurate, and it's a different thing to available as well. So it's like you can have as much data as you want, and it can be really accurate, but if your people don't trust it for whatever reason, it's not going to get used. You're better off having less accurate data that people trust than you are to have really accurate data that people don't trust.
Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Can't comment too much on the data side of it, but I do like the responsibility side of it. And I think avoiding getting into that sort of blame culture, I think exactly as you say, because if you're blaming the driver in this case, or the team, or whatever the terminology is in your industry, as you say, you're missing getting to the crux of the problem, what actually caused it.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You can still investigate, you can ask the questions without it feeling like you're looking to assign blame. It's all about the culture of responsibility, isn't it? And actually identifying what went wrong, how do we stop it happening again, and what can we learn from that? The second half of my question was kind of the same question, but from the other industries you've worked in.
Right.
Because you probably get sick of talking about Formula One.
Oh, it's the thing that gets people going. So
Indeed, yeah.
In terms of, so the question is about what are some of the leadership traits that I've seen work well in other countries.
Leadership lessons, What have you taken from some of those other industries?
There are some moments. So one of the moments from the sausage making days in particular really sticks with me to this day. As I say, it's a high pressure sort of, a high paced environment where you've got to you don't get your orders for the day until halfway through your first shift. So you're getting the first orders to begin with, and then you're making for the rest of the day. And so you've got to react a lot, and you're in the moment. And as a manager, you're sort of there, and you're trying to do everything and manage your people. And as a young manager, as I was at the time, you're trying to do all that, and everything was going wrong. My meat prep side was having some issues, and the production line was having this, and the packing line at the end was a problem. And I was literally, you could probably see me spinning. And my manager at the time did see me spinning. And I was, at that time, I had so many problems I had to solve. And I was like, right, how do I solve all this? How do I do it? And he went, come with me. I went, oh God, what's going on here? Went upstairs and had a coffee. And he talked about something completely different. And at the end of it, he said, what are we going to do now? And I was like, oh, I think we should start with doing this, and then we'll move. Brilliant. Let's go and do that. Just give people that space, even when they think there's so much pressure. I have to do this right now. Do you really? What's the worst that can happen? And how do you invest the time now that's going to give you better opportunities later? So just recognizing that in your people, that when they're spinning, how can you take them and physically take them is a great means of doing this as well. It's like physically take them from the environment they're stuck in and put them somewhere else. Fresh air is brilliant. Go for to a cafe or a different facility in your factory or your office, whatever it might be. So yeah, that's a moment that stuck with me. And then a lot of the other leadership traits that I've seen throughout have all been about just recognizing people as people and recognizing that, they're going through something at the time. It's not just about the project or the work that's in front of them. It's like, actually, how do we incorporate, your spouse might be pregnant. You might be going through some family stuff at that particular time. You might have just won the lottery and you're trying to decide what to do with your life. All sorts of things can happen. And actually, by talking to people and just spending that time to understand them, and I've had some great examples of people who've done that and prioritized the person over the work, and what you end up with is better work because the person is more motivated to do it.
Builds that. important loyalty as well, doesn't it? And,
Indeed.
Yeah, and it all plays to the longevity of your team and your business, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah.
The coffee story is interesting. It reminds me of, so I can't remember what he called it, something like the tactical pause, I think it was.
Right.
What previous guest who was a fire chief in the States. And he would say, in that kind of environment where you've got a massive building on fire, you're very similar to the problem you described in the sausage factory. You've got so many different things coming at you all at once, and you just get overwhelmed. And one of his coping strategies from that was to literally just take a step back and just breathe in for 30 seconds and breathe out and just collect himself. And it's the same kind of strategy, isn't it? It's remove yourself from the causes of stress to give your head time to catch up.
Yeah. And that's a great example of that self-leadership element. If you see it in others, take them out. But if you see it in yourself, and this is where self-reflection and understanding yourself becomes really important. And those strategies of the deep breath in, whatever it might be, and they're really good for grounding you and getting you back to what's important.
Absolutely. And they sound sometimes quite sort of simple and insignificant and maybe even a bit silly, but actually when you do find yourself in that situation, it works.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a story there, and this touched on one of the, because I know you've got a question at the end about leadership embodiment, and one of the people who come to mind but doesn't make it to my my list there would be a big rugby fan and spending time in New Zealand. Richie McCaw was just, as a leader, demonstrating and embodying his leadership in terms of literally putting his body on the line, but also bringing his people with him in a quiet and supportive way. Brilliant leader, superb. But also one of the strategies he had is he would physically ground himself. He would take that breath and he would stamp his feet. And I think he's got a certain number of times he stamps his feet and he's like, I feel the ground beneath me. I'm here on the pitch. Right, let's get back into it. And it is just it's a little habit, but it reminds, if it triggers something in you, go for it. Yeah.
Find whatever your equivalent is that works for you, I guess.
Indeed, yeah.
But it clearly works because so many people are doing it and so many people talk about it. So there we go. You can't deny it.
Yeah. But the medical and physiological science behind just taking deep breaths. There's a in for 3, hold for 3, out for 3. If you try that, it's amazing. Yeah, haven't looked into it in a huge way, but every time I try it, it works an absolute treat. So breathe in for 3, hold for 3, out for 3, and do that 3 times, I think is the routine. And suddenly you find yourself a lot calmer.
Yeah. Same. No, it's worked for me as well, I must say. The physiological as well, like even just the simplest side of it where it will slow your heart rate. That's one of the things when we're under stress, the heart rate goes up and it makes it hard to think because you can hear the thumping, right?
Yeah.
What is one thing that all leaders and managers should do? Be
humble, be kind is my sort of inner mantra. It's like, you don't know everything and you shouldn't know everything, and don't put it all on other people either. So it's like, how do you bring that humility to what you're doing, and how do you show kindness to people so that you can get the best out of them and help them be at their best? And so that's the short answer that I give to people is be humble and be kind.
I like it. Yeah. If you want to get the best out of people, you've got to give them the best.
Yeah.
Simple answers are sometimes the best ones, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what has been your own personal best experience of leadership in the workplace?
So I think that lesson of, being taken out and taken for a coffee and things like that is definitely up there. I think the other element of just people who sit down and leaders who have sat down with me to understand what's going on in my life at the time, and to think, and truly beyond work, as in, even if it means the right thing for you to do is to, I had a coach in New Zealand and who turned into my boss. It's a very weird situation where you go to someone for coaching and then next thing you know, they're coming into a role where they're your boss. But we still managed to have that coach and boss relationship, and it worked really well because we were very specific about it. And he would sort of sit down and, right, what's happening? I want the best out of you. And he was very clear. It's like, even if that means we're going to talk once a month about career development, we're going to specifically talk about that. And even if the right thing for you is to leave this organization and leave me in a hole because, I need you and I want you here. But if the right thing for you is for you to move on, then I will support you all the way. And that only made me want to stay with him longer, So, it's like if you feel cared for, then you're more likely to stay where you are, and you feel connected to the individual and the organization.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that as well. And in fact, I don't anymore, but when I had employees, that's what I would say to them as well. Or when I was managing people, my own boss or manager probably wouldn't have been too happy had he known I was telling them that. But you know what? I didn't really care because it was about getting the best for them.
Yeah. And you also start to identify with that if people aren't right for you, they're not going to give you the best. So, and it also gives you you can get a heads up on that. If you start to really feel through those conversations that this person isn't right for your organization, or they have opportunities that they want to explore elsewhere, the last thing you want as a leader is to be left in the lurch. It's particularly bad when you've got small teams, because you might have a team of 3 or 4 and one person leaves. That's suddenly everyone else has got to share that 25% work across the rest of them. Actually, there's an opportunity to be proactive here and go, right, something might happen here. Let's have some contingency plans in play.
Yeah, but also you don't want to be trying to force or cajole or whatever someone to stay in the role when they've got their eyes elsewhere, because that doesn't. You're going to make them less happy, but also you're going to get less out of them. They're going to be less productive. Their mindset will start to affect the rest of the team as well, and it's just no way to win, is it? Really? If you had the chance to do it all again, start your career from scratch, would you do anything differently? And if so, what would that be?
It's an interesting question. And I generally come back to, as much as I think about, I could have learned from here and done this. No, I'd do it again. It's got me to where I am today, and that's where I want to be. And I'm happy in where I am. I've got places that I want to move from here to in future, but I wouldn't have got to where I am today and had that mix of experience. It's how many people have worked in business banking, made sausages, and helped an airport implement decision-making tools from a Formula One team. It's a fairly unique CV that sits there, and it makes me who I am today. So, unfortunately, the answer is no. I wouldn't change a thing.
I'm actually pleased to hear that. It was a bit of a trick question, if I'm honest. No, I think I'm the same. Right? So they were not quite as varied as you, but even some of the negative experiences that you look back on at the time, you're like, "Wow, I wish this wasn't happening." But in hindsight, actually, I learned so much more from that than almost anything else in my career. So, I probably wouldn't change it.
Now, there's advice I would probably give to myself, but I wouldn't have listened anyway.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Like younger self, terrible at taking advice. Yeah.
Leadership Heroes.
Okay, last question. This is the one we've been looking forward to. It's called Leadership Heroes. Question is, if you had to pick one person, I say one person now because I've had a few people being cheeky and saying 2.
Right.
One person, alive or dead, past, present, real or fictitious, if you're feeling a bit crazy, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that be and why? So,
as I said, rugby fan, and so Richie McCaw came to mind, and or Martin Johnson. I think the two of them are came to mind. But the person I will probably talk about here is I've got a family connection. I'm not a football fan, but I think it's my dad's uncle, I think it was Bob Paisley, the Liverpool manager from the 70s, who was hugely successful, one of the most successful managers ever, but was massively humble along with it. I've got a vague memory of meeting him when I was very young, but having seen some of the stories and videos and things about him over the years, what I loved about how he approached things was, one, he was hugely passionate about the sport. He was hugely passionate about helping people to win and helping people to win as well through that. But the one story that always sticks with me, and I don't even know if this is true or not, but I love the story anyway, is that Liverpool are towards the end of the season. They're streets ahead. They've won the league. It's all there, and they're playing Sunderland. And my dad's side of the family, and Bob Paisley's from Sunderland, or the Sunderland area. And he was a Sunderland fan growing up. And I think Bob Paisley wanted to play for Sunderland in his early days, might even have played for them. And if Sunderland had lost, they were going to get relegated. And so as a manager of a team that has already won the league, the rumour, at least, maybe it's true, is that Bob actually went up to the team and said, if you beat these guys today, you're all sacked. It's the only time I'll ever say lose a game. But if you are responsible, even though you've won the league, if you're responsible for putting my team Sunderland down, then I'll never forgive you and you'll be sacked. And I think it's just a great story, but also it embodies a sort of element of, if you've won, you don't have to win and knock everyone else down at the same time. And I've seen in a lot of organizations that I've worked with, is like, not only do we have to win, but we have to make sure that our competition lose. And actually that drives really bad behaviors. And actually, can you win in such a way that it lifts up your competition with you as well? Because that'll only just make you better as you go through. So Bob Paisley, that's what it'd be.
That is a great lesson. I've no idea who he was. I'm not a football fan, but I like the lesson.
I tell you what, it's got me a few conversations with. I lived and worked in Liverpool for a while, and to sneak in the fact that you're related to Bob Paisley is like being treated like a god at times. So yeah,
right. Okay, yeah, worth a few free drinks then. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. I'll take them all.
I like that. Kind of, you don't have to knock everyone else down in order to win, and I think you can apply that to so much, can you? Like even the sort of the interpersonal dynamics within a team, like. Yeah. If you can elevate everyone, then everyone wins more than by you standing on their heads to get up, get a leg up, as it were.
Exactly.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing about all your different industries that you worked in and everything. It's been great. So I think the last thing I do at the end of every episode is give my kind guest a chance to plug their business or a book or a podcast or whatever you'd like to point the listeners towards if they want to know more about you.
Oh, well, thanks, David. I mean, the main place to go if you want to find out more about me is I've got a website at paulteasdale.co.uk. That's Teasdale, Teasdale. And I've got a podcast of my own called Helping People Perform. So if you go to helpingpeopleperform.com, it actually redirects you to a page within the Paul Teasdale bit. So that's always a good place to go. Active on LinkedIn. And one thing, if you go to my podcast, if you go to anything there, and if you go to my website, you can book a 30-minute call just to talk about, no obligation, not going to try and sell you anything, just that 30-minute call to understand what are some of the lessons from that world of F1 that I've taken that might be useful for you. And if I can add value back in those calls and that's all the conversation we have, then that's great with me. If it leads to anything else in future, fantastic. But reach out, let me know. If you're intrigued, give me a shout.
Awesome. And I'm sure loads of people will do that.
Appreciate it.
I'll put all the links and everything and a link to your LinkedIn profile and everything in the episode description so everyone can find it easily and just click on it. Save remembering or typing, which is always good. Awesome. So anything left for me is to say thank you again for your time. It's been great chatting.
Really appreciate it, David. Thanks for your time.
Thanks again for your time, Paul. That was a great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learned quite a bit myself. So hopefully the listeners have found it helpful too. If you would like to learn more about Paul, I've put the links to his website and his LinkedIn account in the episode description. So do click on that, book a half-hour call with him. And if you want to chat leadership, if you want to know more about leading with integrity or any of the leadership programs that I offer, again, you're welcome to visit the website. It's www.leadernotabos.co.uk/sign up. And do feel free to just visit the website, hit the contact button and get in touch if you'd like to have a chat. More than happy to hear from you, and it'd be great to meet you. And that's all from me today. I hope you'll join us again next week. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and remember, be a leader, not a boss.